everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Male Perspective. I'm your host, Lana Reid, and today, on this day, I have with me a gentleman by the name of Kevin Whitaker. He is the pastor of Epic Church International, a speaker, an author, a mentor, and I'm looking forward to hearing about the work that he's doing and everything that he has got going on. But first and foremost, as I always do, I like to take a quick moment to pause, say thank you for making time for me today. Time is a gift. Once we give it, we can't get it back. So I appreciate you carving out this space for me today. And with that, Pastor Whitaker, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and just looking forward to our time of sharing together.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, as I mentioned, Pastor Whitaker, you are a man of God, okay? And
yes, ma'am.
I want to let you know, as I travel around in this world and talk to us regular folks, sometimes there is a disconnect because some of us are out here, we're winging it, we're making mistakes, we're screwing stuff up, and sometimes spiritual leaders seem to be perfect. We put them on we put them on a pedestal, right?
I'm glad you said seem to be. Go ahead.
But you personally, your story is more relatable to us who are out here trying to find our way. Because you weren't always walking with God. So I was wondering if I could trouble you to share your story of the man you were before you found God.
Absolutely. Of course, I was raised in church, like many of us, but as I grew older, into my teenage years, I decided to go a different path. And a lot of times, as I always tell people, we fall victim to our surroundings. Most of the time we adapt to what it is that we see. And that's not always the healthy thing, because more times than not, when you're growing up, in the hood or the ghetto, as we call it, those images and those things that are around us on a regular basis, they have a negative impact on our lives. So, I began to make choices that were not beneficial for my future. And I started to get into a lot of trouble. I sold drugs, fighting, shooting, you name it. I've done it all. And, it was tough. And, I was going back and forth to court until one situation led me to being faced with 20 years in the penitentiary. And so that was a life-altering moment and a harsh reality that I was faced with, because when you're young, you think you're invincible. You don't think that nothing, it can't happen to me. And I know other people get caught and I'll never get caught. I'm too smart. I'm too this. And then the flip side of that coin, Miss Reid, is that, you somehow become careless, and you become careless and seemingly hopeless about, where life is going to turn out. And we wrestle with that, in the hood, you wrestle with that, like what is my outcome? Is, what is it going to be? Because I see this all around me on a regular basis. And so, upon that, facing the 20 years, I went back and forth to court for about 2.5 to 3 years. And during that process of going to court, when I started off, we had a high dollar lawyer, my brother and I, because we could afford it. Read between the lines. We had a high
life, that other life,
right? And so, but as we got closer and closer to finalizing everything, we could no longer afford that lawyer. And so now we are faced with a public defender who works, of course, most people don't know this, but it's a small nugget. The public defender and the prosecutor work from the same place. Okay, they work for same people, you know. And so it was just one of those situations where, you know, it turned bad. And because I had other charges, let me just share that with the audience. I had another, I was going to court on one level and then going upstairs to fight another case at the same time. So yeah, so I'm fighting a drug case upstairs and I'm fighting a violent case downstairs.
Wow.
And so, you know, I had, you know, I tell people I thank God for where I am. I thank God for where he's brought me, because, you know, at one time I was a felon several times over. But no longer, you know, if you search my record, that's no longer there. The same judge that gave me those felonies removed those felonies about 8 years ago, because of he saw the life that I was living. It was presented to him. I had never been in trouble again, you know, since that time. And so all of that was removed. And so I went to court that day just to kind of give you some insight on how God intervened. I went to court that day. My brother and I went with the mindset that I'm going to prison today, you know, because this was the last, you know, this was our last court date. Everyone before me had got like 20 years, 25 years. And then he called my name. When I got out there in the courtroom, you know, he went over my charges and everything like they do, you know, and the courtroom is filled with people, not just for me, but, you know, their loved ones are going to trial and different things of that nature. And the judge looked at me and said, I don't know why I'm doing this, but I'm not sending you to prison today. I could have fainted. I didn't, because number one, I was guilty. You understand what I'm saying? Like, there was no question about, you know, and not only was I involved with the crime, it was just my brother and I, so we were involved together. I had so many other charges, you know, from previous situations, terroristic threatening, aggravated assault, all of these things that they're looking at. And the man said he wasn't going to send me to prison. Thus began another whole journey in life for me, which started before that day. And I made up in my mind, I said, well, God had been after me. I was in the music industry. So that's another part of it. And I was in the music industry, and we were poised to do great things in the music industry. But one of the problems was we was rapping it and living.
Wow.
Okay. And so I always tell people when I encounter artists that have great potential, because although I'm a preacher, you know, I understand entertainment, I understand artists, I understand all that because I came out of that. And I believe that God got his people everywhere. That's just my opinion. You know, I don't believe that just because you sing a certain kind of music or that you're destined for hell. I just don't believe that. You know, you know, so but anyway, we were in the music industry. You know, we opened up Ice Cube, B.I.G., like we were really doing great things.
Okay.
But people started to go to prison and different things, and you know, and all of that. And so ultimately, you know, God saved me from that situation of 20 years, of which they told us we would have to do 10 years before we would even eligible for parole. So it was because of the kind of weapons that we had. That's just what it was. And so, you know, now 25 years later, I've been in ministry for 25 years, pastoring for 17 years. I've served as a doing gang intervention for the Shelby County school system there in Memphis, Tennessee. I've done that. My church, when I was in Memphis, I'm in Georgia now. When I was in Memphis, we hosted peace rallies and different things to try to bring gangs together to, you know, stop all the killing and murdering, because our church was we were in the hood,
Mm-hmm.
and so I always believe that if your church, a man came into my church years ago, and he told me, if your church can close down and no one cares, you haven't done anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we endeavored to make an impact in the community. So we partnered with the Girls and Boys Club of America, and we just tried to do things. And we had events at our church, to do things. And so that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Okay.
Just kind of who I am. I don't want to hog it all because I know you got things that you want to ask.
Well, I'm going to build on some of the stuff you said. Now, I do want to ask because I think people go through this a lot. You could have very well, let me backtrack. You said you were living this life, and you got to this point where the judge said, I'm going to let you go.
So, yeah, it was crazy.
But you could have very well said, I got off, party.
Right.
Let me
Absolutely.
keep on. So what was it about that particular time that said, you know what, I gotta change my ways?
There were several things. One, I have 5 daughters. At that time, I had 2. Okay. And the whole situation that happened, my house got shot up by some people that I had no issues with, but people just jealousy in the streets and different things like that. Things that we were doing, they were just jealous of it. And my daughter almost got shot. Okay. The bullets went over her head, which led to the event where we were faced with the 20 years.
Okay, gotcha.
You see, so, but just that, wanting to be there, a man told me, when you go off and you start shooting and killing up people, who's going to take care of your children? He said, I understand you're angry and you want to get revenge, but who's going to take care of your children? Mm-hmm. And so I had, even though the event happened after he told me that, I believe that God intervened and allowed me to really process that. Mm-hmm. And, and during that time of going to court, I had started going to church, and I was literally being mentored and discipled by an incredible man who spent time with me and showed me that you can actually live better than you're living. And you don't have to be mean, you don't have to be fighting, you don't have to be low down. You can actually be a decent human being. Mm-hmm. Which I knew that, right? You know that in your heart, but you become swept away with the things that you're involved in. And I tell people this. The streets are intoxicating. Like, people can say what they want. But listen, I'm a preacher. I love God. I've been preaching 25 years, but I was having a blast in the world, okay? I was having fun, right? Like, I was living by my own rules, doing whatever I was big and bad enough to do. That's just what it was. Mm-hmm. And so, but the streets, I was sharing with a young man the other day, the streets are unforgiving. They don't protect you. You can be loyal to the streets, but the streets are not loyal to anyone. They're not loyal to anyone. And so it was just, at that time, God had really started to deal with my heart, as it relates to what I had been running from for years. Mm-hmm. I knew God called me, but I didn't want to be a preacher. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so, quick little story before, there was a man who grew up with my great grandfather. His name was Mr. Frank Garrett. He was a very old man. My grandfather said that he was old when he was a little boy. So no one really knew how old he was. But, he was an old man from the streets, hung out at the juke joints and all that. So at the time we were selling drugs, he would allow us to use his house to cut our drugs up and bag them and all that stuff. So one day he looks at me, I'm bagging drugs, I'm smoking weed, and I'm doing everything that I do. And he says, you're going to be a preacher. Just out of the blue, with crack all on the table and marijuana in my mouth. He looks at me and says, you're going to be a preacher. And it stunned me because I'm like, huh?
You
like,
sure?
Right. Exactly. Like, you talking to me? And he said, you are. He said, you are just like your great grandfather. He said he was a man in the streets and he became a preacher. You look like him. You act like him. And I believe that you're going to be a preacher. And that's what ultimately happened.
Them old folks, they know. Them old
They
folks,
know things.
They know.
They know things.
Now you mentioned that you work with troubled youth, and I'm kind of want to build on your experience and all of that.
Sure.
But as I was getting ready for today's show, I was watching a video where you were talking about your book, where you talk about your story, Too Hard to Break. And you mentioned something that resonated with me, and it was this concept of we have change, we have choices, consequences, and then we have change.
Yes.
Well, some of us have change. And it made me think of Isaiah 43:19, behold, I will do a new thing. Right?
Come on now.
So when it comes to our kids, because today they just seem to be.
It's rough. It's heartbreaking, gut wrenching to watch our youth of today. Now, when I talked about the music, again, I don't believe that everybody that does music and entertainment, is demonic. But there is some music that is just completely spiritually and mentally unhealthy for our children. And so, when I talk to my children, I tell them, hey, you shouldn't, don't listen to that. That's not healthy for you. And I try to know what they're listening to, because I was young and I understand that. And so I try to know what they're listening to. But yeah, our children are, this is what I tell people: as the days draw closer to the end, more is revealed. The devil is going to wreak havoc as much as he can, because he knows, as the Bible teaches us, his days are numbered. His days are numbered. And so while he's wreaking havoc, he always does it through the youth. He always does it through the youth. When you look back at Cain and Abel, these are the youth, and Cain rises up and kills his brother, and so with each generation, these things get worse. And so here we are now in the 21st century, and we're dealing with so much chaos. We're dealing with pretty much a godless society, whereby anything goes. There are no rules, there are no regulations. And we just have to make sure, those of us who care about the future, those of us who care about young people, I just believe we have to do something. We have to, we can't solve all, you can't solve them all, I can't solve them all. However, if we all do something,
yes,
we can make an impact on our young people.
True. One piece of work, one small work here and there builds into a bigger picture, and we have a bigger impact.
Sure.
Now, I want to build on that. The kids are very near and dear to me, but us as a whole is very near and dear to me.
Sure.
And I was listening to something you were doing on Facebook, your prayer warrior for Black women empowerment. Right?
Yes, I am on the executive board for Black women empowerment. I'm one of two men that are on that board. And I absolutely love our founder and our CEO, Dr. Jacqueline King. She is an incredible woman. She's like a big sister to me. And I appreciate the opportunity. So yeah, and I am also the director of BME, which is a branch of BWE, Black Men Empowered. So yeah.
Okay. But you were I want to circle back to what I was listening to you talk about. You were talking about distractions. And
Mm.
and I was having a conversation just last week with somebody about the importance of having purpose partners, and not necessarily just romantic, but your friendships, your business
Come
network.
on.
You have to
Yes.
make sure you have purpose partners, because it's easy for the enemy to distract you if you're not walking with people who are in alignment with your purpose.
Absolutely.
So I wonder, how do we have discernment, because the enemy is very tricky. How do we have discernment with
Mhm.
getting the right circle around us? Because like the world is chaotic,
Mhm.
I mean, it's crazy out there.
It is, and one of the things that we have to be, discernment is just simply the ability to assess a situation, and apply God's word and principles to that situation so that you can get the best outcome
Mhm.
that you can possibly get. And so one way to enhance your discernment is to make sure that you have study time and prayer time. I believe that at the closer we get to God in our study time and in our prayer time, the more we soak up His ways, the more we, just by spending time with God, the better our discernment becomes as it relates to things that are healthy for us and unhealthy for us,
Mhm.
circles that are unhealthy for us. And, because a lot of people say things like, well, my friends don't support me. Well, you have to evaluate your circle and find out if they're really your friends. You
Come
see what
on
I'm
now.
saying? You
Come
got,
on
and you
now.
have to be able to call a spade, because friends support you. Now, of course, they can't do everything, they can't be everywhere. But if you always feel like my friends don't have my back, then you need to discern, you need to assess the situation to figure out, are these your friends?
Mhm.
You see what I mean?
Mhm.
Because they could very well not be your friends. My wife and I had a particular situation that we had to assess and use discernment and apply wisdom in dealing with some people when we realized, hold up, they never support us ever, And so, guess what? We have to make some decisions that are beneficial for our future.
Okay.
So we got,
Okay.
so you have to let people go.
Okay. Okay. Now, when it comes to discernment, um, a lot of people are having some issues with finding a church home. A lot of
Mm.
times people are feeling disconnect
Okay,
with some of the churches, some of the churches.
sure.
How do you find a place, that fits your spirit? How do you, I mean, because a lot of people are disheartened out there when I talk to believers. They're like, I
Sure.
want to, but
Right. Right. I think that when you are looking for a church home, like we always tell people, you may find a bigger church, but you won't find a better church. That starts with leadership.
Mhm.
And I think that when you connect with a church, with leaders, with the people who are a part of that congregation, you can kind of tell if you fit.
Mhm.
you know you can kind of tell, if this is a place filled with love, if that love is obvious, then you can, okay, let me see how I fit in here, let me see what, and a lot of times, it's the leadership, but it's also the people. We have to make sure, what I teach our people is, people, there are a million churches. Be glad that someone came here.
Mhm.
People have options. People have options. It's 10 churches up the street. Be glad that someone stopped here. And so,
Mhm.
because they stopped here, we're going to appreciate them. And we're
Mhm.
going to show them, no matter where they are in life, that we care about them. And even if they don't join this church, right, then they can still leave knowing that someone cares and God loves them. They may go join another church, and that's still expanding the kingdom of God. That's still, you see what I'm saying? If you don't come to my church, don't mean that you're lost. You know, you may have just come there just for the purpose to soften your heart for where God has assigned you to.
Gotcha.
You see? Yeah.
Good. So let me circle back, because I kind of went another direction after you mentioned it.
Okay.
Black men empowered and Black women empowered.
Mm-hmm.
How do we connect with that? What is that all about? How does a person get their spirit filled with that? What is all that about?
What is Black women empowered about?
Black women empowered and Black men empowered.
So again, Black men empowered is a branch of Black women empowered. Black women empowered would be considered the mother of it, the mother ministry. And Black women empowered does a lot for veterans. Black women empowered. Right now, we're in the process. Keep it under wraps. Everybody don't know. We're in the process now of trying to get a home for battered women. So Black women empowered, they've helped pay bills for people. I've been with them now for 4 years. They've helped so many people over the 4 years that I've been there. Some people that I know personally that they have helped. And so it's a real ministry. It's a real ministry that does real work. We're not just preaching and praying, but we're physically trying to make an impact on the lives of people.
Awesome. I didn't know that was actually That's awesome.
Yeah.
Like to see my man of God doing godly things.
Absolutely. And everybody who's a part of that is volunteer. We're not getting paid to do that. It's ministry. And I'm not saying people shouldn't get paid, but there has to be something you're willing to do for free. You know what I mean? There has to be something that you're willing to do for free to help others. And so, this is my contribution, along with things that my church does, but this is definitely a part of my contribution to try to make the world better.
Awesome. That's one of the conversations that us regular folks have. It's very difficult to see your pastor getting on a jet and you're getting on the bus. So it's nice to hear that it's nice to hear that it's volunteer and
not getting paid to do it. Definitely not getting paid to do it.
Now,
I do it, but I do it wholeheartedly though. Nothing is different about what I do for Black women empowered, Black men empowered. The passion that I put into what I do at my church, it's no different. Because whatever we do for God, we have to do it with an excellent spirit, so that people's lives can truly be impacted by it. So I give my all to it.
A true servant. I want to talk about another book that you're involved in, Lessons for a Little Boy. And it is a collection of a lot of men who have sat down and shared some of their story or some of their thoughts. Your chapter is Faith It Till You Make It. What's the meaning? What's the meaning of that chapter?
Well,
the title.
So if I had to summarize that thought of that title, I, even as a young boy, if you read in the chapter, I talk about how Spider-Man came out with a toy. Mm-hmm. And my parents purchased that toy for me, and it was the little artificial web that you could shoot. Yeah. And that was the beginning. If I could remember clearly when I really started to dream. And so Faith It Till You Make It is kind of like, I've always believed, no matter my circumstances, no matter what was going on, that I was called to do something great in the earth. I've always believed that. And through all of my trials, even though, I started a record label at 20 years old, and this was back when starting a record label was not so simple. Mm-hmm. There was no internet to go on and pull up. I'm 51. And so I'm talking, this back in 90, there was no internet, there was no Google, you know what I mean? You had to go to the library and do research and figure out how to get this paperwork. And so me and a dear friend of mine, Glenn Murray, who is the reason, we started a record label together. We've been friends for 30 plus years. Yeah, that's my dearest friend. We've been friends for 30. We met at the locker. I think I was 15, he was 16 or something like that. And we've been friends ever since. And so we started a record label together years ago. Initially, he was a part of the rap group. And so, but faith it till you make it is just about being consistent in what you believe your destiny and your purpose is. Being consistent. Don't let nothing stop you. Obstacles are created so that you can overcome them. I tell people, like, water is made for us to drink, air is made for us to breathe. Obstacles are made for us to overcome them. And that's how we have to focus on it. We got to faith it till we make it.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. Now, let me ask you this. Well, I think I got two more questions. What time? Oh, yeah, okay. 2 more questions. Listening to your story, especially because you work with teens, if you were to have a conversation with a youngster, boy or girl, who's about to go down the path that you went down, what would the conversation sound like?
Well, the first thing that I wouldn't be overly judgmental, because I do understand how the streets can suck you in. But I would be brutally honest with them about my experience and how, as I stated earlier, you can be loyal to the streets, but they're not going to be loyal to you. You can love the streets, but the streets will not love you back. And ultimately, is going to destroy you. And I've told them that on many occasions. I don't work in the school system now. I'm here in Georgia, and I'm trying to get some other things going so that I can make an impact. But I would be brutally honest with them about, they have options, because you would be surprised at how many of our young people don't believe that they have options. Years ago, I was preaching on an outside revival, and there were drugs dealings going on, prostitutes, and everything was there, right there in the projects where I was preaching. And so, I talked with some of the guys, because at that time, I wasn't too far removed from the streets. I had just kind of accepted my calling. So I understood it. And listening to their stories and how young men were telling me, man, I don't want to be out here. I just feel like I have no other options, and so just making sure that they understand that they have options,
True. Got options. All right. Now I'm gonna wrap it up, because I try not to take up too much of your time. You got stuff to do.
Yes, ma'am. We got prayer meeting tonight.
Oh, yeah, let me go. So you are a servant leader. And I cannot tell you how many times growing up it was pounded in my head. You got to serve. You got to serve others. You are here to serve others. But let me be honest, Pastor. We live in a very cruel, selfish world.
Sure.
Sometimes it's hard to keep that spirit of serving others in you. So what would you say to me to encourage me to keep on pressing through? When
yes,
sometimes I want to look at people and say, you know what?
I get it. Well, one of the things that helps me and my wife and I, we've been married this year for 22 years, coming up the latter part of the year. And the whole time that we've been together, we've served the lives of other people. And it can be discouraging and disheartening. However, one of the things that keeps me going, if I had to encourage you and keep you going,
come on now,
I would tell you to always know that it's bigger than you. So what helps me is to overcome, because you can do stuff for people and they'll act like you haven't done anything. They'll start to take you for granted. They'll misuse your kindness. And there have been times where I've said, you know what, I'm not helping nobody else, only to find myself doing it again. Because here this. When you are truly a servant and you love people, you are going to get past it because you realize that I can't help but to help people. It's a burden in my soul to help people, and so I always tell myself, it's not about you, Kevin. It's not about you. Don't get caught up. Don't get in your feelings. And we're human. We can get emotional, but we have to talk ourselves out of it. It's not about us. And eventually, even if people don't celebrate you, God always sees.
Yes, indeed.
He always knows,
yes,
and he always cares about what
yes,
we're doing.
Indeed. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Well, Pastor Whitaker, I have taken up enough of your time. I'm going to ask you my random question. I hope
yes, ma'am.
I hope it's something a pastor can answer, so we're gonna see here.
We're gonna see. Okay, let's go.
Let's see what we got. If your waiter or waitress was a total jerk, do you still leave a tip?
Sometimes. That is a true story. Sometimes I do it just to show them that all of their ignorance was unnecessary. And then there are times when they just I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna show them that they missed out.
You missed your blessing.
You missed it. Yep. So sometimes
depends. All righty, Pastor Whitaker. How do we pick up the book? How do we catch service? How do we catch the prayer, Bible study, all that stuff?
Well, okay. You can just go to Epic Church Atlanta on Facebook, and if you go there, you can keep up with all things Epic. You can follow me on Facebook. That's Kevin Whitaker. On Instagram, it's Bishop Kevin Whitaker. On LinkedIn, it's Bishop Kevin Whitaker. The book, Lessons for a Little Boy, and Too Hard to Break, which is my autobiography about my personal life. You can get them everywhere books are sold. Amazon.com. You can, you can go to barnesandnoble.com. You can go to walmart.com. You can go everywhere books are sold. You can go and find these books, Lessons for a Little Boy. I think that it will be an absolute blessing to young men and young women. Even though that we're the center of it, the focus of it is for young boys, but I think that it's an encouragement for anybody who would take the time to read.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. I love it. And it's nice to see a man of God that we can connect with, because like I said, sometimes we put them up, but your story is relatable for us. So,
yes,
I just love it. I love all the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much.
You and the First Lady, y'all keep on touching souls. From my little corner, I love what y'all do. So
thank you so much. Keep us in your prayers.
Awesome. That is all for this week's episode of The Male Perspective. I'm your host, Lana Reid, and I will see everybody next time.